Have you ever noticed how some people walk into chaos like it's just another Tuesday? The pipe bursts, the laptop crashes 5 minutes before the deadline. The relationship explodes, the car will not start. Everyone else is panicking, pacing, Googling symptoms of disaster with trembling fingers. And then there's that one person. They go silent for a second, not because they are not stressed, not because they magically know the answer, but because somewhere deep in their mind, a different process starts running. Instead of, why is this happening to me? Their brain asks, okay, what do we do first? And if you are not one of those people, watching them can feel almost offensive, because while they are calmly unscrewing something, making calls, solving the problem step by step, your nervous system already left the building. Your mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios before the situation even fully loaded. So the question is, what exactly separates these people from everyone else? Why do some people collapse under uncertainty while others become strangely calm inside it? And the answer has almost nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, once you understand this, you will start noticing it everywhere, in relationships, careers, friend groups, families, even in the way people speak. Because there is a psychological difference between people who believe problems are survivable and people who believe problems are proof they are doomed. And that difference quietly shapes entire lives. Psychologist Bandura spent years studying something called self-efficacy, and stripped of all the academic language, it comes down to one simple belief. Can I handle what's in front of me? Not, will life be easy? Not, will everything work out perfectly? Just, even if this gets difficult, do I believe I can deal with it? That belief changes almost everything. How long you persist before giving up, how quickly you panic, how your nervous system reacts under stress, how much pain you can tolerate before shutting down. People with high self-efficacy do not necessarily experience fewer problems. They just experience themselves differently inside the problem. And the craziest part is, most of them were not born this way. This usually starts much earlier than people realize. Think about a child trying to solve something for the first time, not being rescued immediately, not being told the answer instantly, actually figuring something out on their own. Maybe they fixed a loose wire. Maybe they stopped themselves from falling off a bike. Maybe they solved a problem nobody thought they could solve. That moment seems tiny from the outside. But psychologically, it is enormous because the child learns something dangerous. My actions can change outcomes. And once the brain experiences that enough times, problems stop feeling like uncontrollable threats. They start feeling like puzzles. That's what Bandura called mastery experiences, and decades of research still show they are one of the strongest builders of confidence that exist. Not compliments, not motivational speeches, not someone saying, "You got this." Actual lived evidence. I did something difficult before. I survived uncertainty before. I can probably survive this too. That is where real confidence comes from, not positive thinking, memory. And this becomes painfully obvious in adulthood. Because when something goes wrong, most people do not react to the actual problem. They react to what the problem means about them. A delayed text becomes, "I'm being abandoned." A mistake at work becomes, "I'm incompetent." One awkward conversation becomes, "I ruin everything." The external event is small, but internally it activates years of learned helplessness. That phrase comes from psychologist Seligman, who discovered something terrifying about the human mind. When people repeatedly experience situations where their actions seem powerless, eventually they stop trying altogether. even when escape becomes possible. Read that again. People can become so conditioned to feeling powerless that they stop recognizing their own ability to change things. And once that pattern forms, it spreads everywhere. You stop speaking up. You stop taking risks. You avoid difficult conversations. You procrastinate decisions. You wait for certainty before acting. You outsource responsibility for your life to other people because uncertainty itself starts feeling unbearable. That is why some people freeze over things that seem small to others. It is never just the situation. It is the accumulated emotional history attached to it. And meanwhile, the people who seem calm under pressure usually developed something else entirely, a tolerance for ambiguity. Meaning, they can exist inside uncertainty without emotionally combusting. This matters more than people understand. Because life is ambiguity. Relationships are ambiguity. Business is ambiguity. Healing is ambiguity. Even happiness is ambiguity. Nobody really knows what they are doing all the time. Some people are just better at staying functional while they figure it out. And ironically, those people are often less emotionally dramatic, not because they feel less fear, but because they stopped treating fear like an emergency signal. That changes everything. Because if every uncomfortable emotion feels dangerous, your entire life becomes built around avoidance. Avoid hard conversations, avoid rejection, avoid responsibility, avoid failure, avoid looking stupid, avoid uncertainty, avoid starting. And eventually, your life shrinks to the size of your nervous system's comfort zone. That is why two people can stand in the exact same situation and react completely differently. One person sees, this could go wrong. The other sees, this might be solvable. Same reality, different internal architecture. But here's where this gets even deeper. Some people become fixers for unhealthy reasons, and this part rarely gets talked about honestly. There are people who learn to solve everyone's problems because it was emotionally necessary for survival. Maybe chaos filled their childhood home. Maybe emotions were unpredictable. Maybe being useful was the only way to receive love. Maybe being helpless felt dangerous, so they adapted. They became hyper-capable, the calm one, the responsible one, the one everyone depends on. But internally, they're not calm at all. They are terrified of things falling apart. Because somewhere deep down, their nervous system decided, if I stay useful enough, maybe nothing bad will happen. And that is why some highly competent people secretly cannot relax. They hover, they over-control, they micromanage. They struggle to let others help. They feel guilty resting. They panic when things feel unresolved. Because fixing became identity, not choice. And honestly, some people watching this are probably realizing they have spent their whole lives being admired for a survival mechanism. But then there is another kind of person, and this is the one that changes people around them, the genuinely curious person, the person who sees broken things and becomes interested instead of threatened. These people are different. They do not fix things to prove worth. They fix things because they genuinely enjoy understanding how things work. They can sit with confusion longer. They ask questions longer. They experiment longer. Failure does not immediately become shame. It becomes information. That is a completely different psychological relationship with life. And spending time around people like that can quietly rewire you. Because they model something most people never learned. Not knowing is temporary. That sentence alone can change a life. Not knowing is temporary. Most people unconsciously treat incompetence like an identity. I'm bad at this. I'm not the kind of person who can do that. I could never handle that. But competence is usually just exposure, plus repetition, surviving long enough to stop feeling unfamiliar. That is it. The people you admire were confused once too. They were just willing to stay in the confusion longer than most people can tolerate. And honestly, that might be one of the most important differences between people who change their lives and people who stay stuck for decades. One group interprets discomfort as evidence to stop. The other interprets discomfort as part of the process. That is why growth often looks boring from the outside. It is rarely one huge transformation. It is small moments where somebody does not abandon themselves. They make the call, they ask the question, they try again. They sit with uncertainty 5 minutes longer than last time. They stop waiting to feel ready. And eventually something strange happens. Their nervous system starts updating. The brain slowly realizes, oh, we survive things now. That is how confidence is actually built. Not through motivation, through evidence, tiny repeated evidence. And this is important because a lot of people consume psychology content the same way people scroll fitness videos. They understand everything intellectually, but nothing changes behaviorally. They can explain their trauma, explain their patterns, explain why they procrastinate, explain why they sabotage relationships. But explanation alone does not create momentum. Awareness without action becomes another form of paralysis. At some point, understanding yourself has to become movement, even tiny movement, because your brain trusts actions more than thoughts. You can tell yourself, I'm capable, but the nervous system believes proof. That is why the smallest acts matter more than people think. Cleaning the mess you have been avoiding, sending the email, making the appointment, having the difficult conversation, trying before you feel confident. Those moments look insignificant, but psychologically, they are identity updates. Every small action quietly answers the question, am I someone who handles things or someone who waits to be rescued? And the answer is not fixed. That is the good news. Your brain is constantly adapting to the evidence you give it, which means the person you are right now is not permanent. The anxious version of you, the avoidant version, the overwhelmed version, the version that freezes and spirals and procrastinates and overthinks everything. None of that is necessarily your final form. It may simply be the nervous system you trained through repetition. And repetition can be retrained slowly, awkwardly, imperfectly, but absolutely. The people you admire are usually not fearless. They just built a different relationship with uncertainty. They learned that panic is not preparation, avoidance is not protection, and helplessness is not identity. And if you take anything from this video, let it be this. Your life changes the moment you stop asking, what if I can't handle this? And start asking, what if I become someone who can? Because those are two completely different futures, and one of them begins the second you stop waiting for certainty before acting. If this video spoke to something you have been feeling lately, subscribe to the channel. And if you are tired of living inside the same cycles of overthinking, hesitation, emotional exhaustion, and constantly starting over, check the pinned comment and description. I have prepared a structured reset guide designed to help you rebuild consistency, emotional control, and follow through step by step without relying on motivation. Start small, but start.